And welcome to the weekend. And welcome to Prepper Talk Radio here on K-Talk, 1640 AM. Here with Scott Stalling, Shane Coles, and also our wonderful guest, Suzanne Sherman, who is a regular guest on the show here. And not just our show. She's been on our show, but on other shows on here on the channel as well. So
she bounces around the entire network.
Just working it, baby.
All right, let's see if that works a little better.
Are we there? Oh, snap.
Testing.
It's showing on there. It's just not in my mic. There we go.
Wrong button again. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Shane.
Yes, I'm getting to learn this board a little bit better. So thanks for joining us again on this Friday afternoon, which we'd love so much to do the show and be here on. It's an early start to our weekend, to my weekend anyway. So let me say that. Welcome, Suzanne. Welcome, Scott.
Great to be back.
Now, I know Scott's messing with volumes over here.
Yep.
Today we're going to continue our topic for the month, which is Gun Month, or Firearms Month. We want to try and talk about most every topic that we possibly can within the next 4 weeks. It's low.
It's so loud. The music. I'm complaining about the music in the background because it's so loud still.
And I don't understand. I can't read lips, and I don't understand hand signals. So you'll have to excuse me.
So we need to go back to the orienteering merit badge and BSA days and learn hand signaling for the radio.
For the radio. All right. So what is going on nowadays? Are you watching the markets? Do you see what's going on?
I work all day.
Well, I do
and
too,
I'm on phone all day. So I check in every once in a while. But there's not really a whole lot that I'm pleased with.
Or that we can do about it either. So other than prepare, right? So I think some people are saying, oh, this is the big crash. This is it. Some people say, no, it's just a correction.
I think it's a correction. I don't think it's crash time yet. I think we've got a lot of things that are going to have to happen first.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, I think our government, the way it is right now, I think they're just going to continue to adjust and salvage it and print money to inflate and keep certain people in power. And it's not just our government. It's world government.
Well, to me, it seems like a bit of a tug-of-war. And what I mean by that is, that there's the deep state and its elements that have some control over our economy and politics and such, and then there's Trump and the presidency and the executive branch. Seems to me like there's a bit of a tug-of-war going on there. But that's not the topic of the day. I wanted to do a quick financial update.
Oh, I was like, what? I thought that was third segment. Why are we here?
Well, because that's where my brain's going right now. So that's why we're here right now.
The show just started. It's not ending.
I know that.
Start in the beginning.
All right, cool. Let's
I
start.
think you did this last time I was on, too. We had a topic, and then you did something
I just take it somewhere else.
Scott and I just sat here. Where are we going with this?
Guys.
Hey, what's that? That's pretty and shiny. What's that?
Yeah, squirrel.
Squirrel.
So, no, it's Gun Month. This is the best topic for February. Mm-hmm. It's the month of love, right? We all love our guns as preppers, right? Some of you preppers may not be gun enthusiasts, but you should at least be aware of what's going on in the world of gun rights, gun lobbyists, gun restrictions. And we brought Suzanne on because, number one, we love her. Number two, she knows her crap. Like, I would use another word, but I think I'd get fined. She knows what's going on, and she can talk to it better than most. And she's put together some pretty amazing pieces that have actually changed my opinion on, for example, national reciprocity for CCW.
Yeah, let's start there.
So, let's start there. I used to be a proponent for it. I was like, man, if I can CCW here, I should be allowed to do it anywhere else. That's not fair. It's my right. Mm-hmm. Well, my right is to keep and bear arms, right?
Well, it's also, we're thinking we'd like to travel, and we don't want to have to learn the laws of each state, right, to figure out, okay, how can I carry my firearm in this state and this state and so forth? Do I have to carry it in a case? Can I carry it in my person? Can I carry it in my vehicle? But, yeah, so reciprocity sounds real nice, right, that I can have it on me, I can go wherever I want.
But why is it not? Dun, dun, dun. Suzanne.
Well, here's the thing. Also, having lived in California, when I would drive back and forth to California, I would keep, because I can do this in Utah, I'd keep a sidearm in the vehicle with me. And then what we're supposed to do when we cross into California state lines is to take my firearm and remove it, lock it up separately from my ammunition. And did I do it all the time? No, not really. So a lot of people also that have a concealed carry permit issued to them by their home state want to travel across state lines and not be a criminal thanks to legislative fiat when they leave a state other than which the state they've been issued a concealed carry permit or one that has reciprocity. I think Utah has 31. But if you go into California, you're going to be a criminal because the duly elected representatives of the people of California have said so, that they don't want it. So President or candidate Donald Trump had said that he is going to put forth a suggestion for national reciprocity so we don't have people become criminals for virtue of doing nothing other than crossing state lines, meaning they give up their Second Amendment rights, which is something else we need to discuss, by virtue of leaving their state.
So it sounded good on the onset to those of us who weren't really educated enough to understand what was really going on behind the scenes. I mean, the proposal is like, yeah, sure, we want those rights. Well, if we really go back far enough, we already had those rights, and those rights have been stripped away over the last few hundred years. But let's go back to the argument for today. Why is a national reciprocity bad?
Well, for me, the threshold inquiry of any legislation, whether or not it involves firearms or whatever, emanating from Washington, D.C., is their constitutional authority. Now, when they put forth legislation, they have to have a statement of constitutionality, and their justification for this law, was a representative, I believe, out of North Carolina that's putting this forth, said, yes, there is because of the Second Amendment. Well, wait a minute. The Second Amendment is there to specifically prohibit the general government from regulating firearms at all, period, whether it's good, whether it's bad. And what people say is, well, this is a step in the right direction towards firearm rights. And the problem is when we consider the Second Amendment as in any way, shape, or form granting us rights vis-a-vis our firearms, we are telling Washington, D.C., we accept the fallacious notion that you have granted us the right to keep and bear arms. It did not come from you. This is a restriction upon you that was added, as stated in the preamble of the Bill of Rights, to instill confidence that they would not go beyond their constraints.
And it didn't come from the Constitution either.
No, these are natural rights.
Unalienable natural rights, whether be they by God, be they by just being born, whatever your belief system is, doesn't really matter. It's these are your rights before government, before anybody else. It's just your right. It's not, you don't have you don't need permission for it because it's your right.
Oh, we've got the phone ringing here. Should we take a call here? What do you say?
Gamble.
All right, cool. All right, welcome to K-Talk. You're live. Would you have a comment or question for us? Oh, I caught him just
Lost
late there.
Him. Call back.
Try. Sorry, we're a little slow here.
Yeah, if you guys have comments or questions about this topic today, specifically right now we're talking about concealed carry, we're talking about national reciprocity, please call in. We'd love to hear your content, questions, and as well comments.
Now, my concern is I like to be an obedient citizen, right?
I've seen you speed.
Shh.
I've seen myself speed too. I was trying to keep up.
Absolutely. But I think you know where I'm getting to with this. I don't want to go to jail, right? I've got a family to take care of. Yet, I still believe exactly what you're saying here, Suzanne. And so, what can we do about this? In the past, typically the word has been civil disobedience, but we see where that's gotten the Bundys, for example. So, where do we go from here? I mean, do we just roll over and take it like a good servant?
Well, it depends on what are we getting at. If you think national reciprocity is a good idea, let's first take it from that aspect. Okay. So we've established that there is no constitutional authority for national reciprocity.
Given the federal government, right?
Yes, because any law that they have regarding firearms is going to be unconstitutional. And to understand this, you have to look at what the intent of the framers were. And this really ties into the idea that the militia was supposed to be the ultimate vanguard of our liberties, and not just while serving in a militia, active or not, but it was also supposed to be so we could defend ourselves from assaults. If you look in the ratification document, protection, personal protection from assaults was also part of their concern. So they feared a standing army. The founders, the framers, did not want a standing army. They felt it was a bane to liberty. Yeah. If you have a standing army, you're going to have warfare, you're going to have taxation, you're going to have tyranny at home. And these people were prophetic. This is exactly what we're seeing right now. For crying out loud, we're borrowing $1 trillion. We just killed 100 people in Syria. Again, I don't have any rights that need defending in Syria or the Congo.
Amen.
And so everything they've said has come to fruition.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a call here. Hello, you're live here on Prepper Talk Radio. Do you have a question or comment for us about gun rights in particular?
Hello, am I on live?
You are on live.
Okay, that was quick. Hello, everyone.
Hello. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm not taking a totally strong position right here. I just if you don't mind, I'd like to brainstorm with all of you.
Go for it.
Sure.
Okay, great. Now I do understand in the cowboy days, people had firearms, and you had to get food to eat, and you had to defend yourself. And then when you go into the town, some towns would have you check your sidearms in. Especially like the rowdy cowboys, the drunken.
We see a lot of that in movies.
Sure. Okay. Well, definitely we have the right to defend ourselves. The people used to be the militia. The people was the army. We were the militia. And also, we actually were the law.
Yes.
Especially in our ranches and our homes. And we protected ourselves and our families, as citizens, self-rule. Now, this probably sounds really weird, and I don't know if they could come up with something that would work, but what about law-abiding citizens, that have carrying permits? What if some of them could be kind of like deputies? Couldn't deputies carry their firearms, or sheriffs, across county or state lines? I'm not sure about that.
Do you see the government sharing that kind of power with us serfs, us citizens?
Negative, Ghost Rider. Actually, it's interesting, though. There is a pending law that's coming out from Utah legislators that they want to make it mandatory that if a peace officer requires your assistance, that you are
I saw that.
under an obligation to render it. And my question, we were discussing this with Ben McClintock from Defending Utah, where do they draw the line with this? Are we going to be expected to use our firearms? And we don't have time for it now, but there was a case out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where an armed citizen saved the life of a police officer in distress, and it ruined him financially and got him in a lot of trouble with the ACLU, the NAACP. You can see where we're going with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you have any more comments for us?
Well, in that situation, if the officer's yelling, help, help, he's asking for help, and how can someone help, if someone is armed assaulting the officer, unless the citizen is not armed, either concealed or openly carry. Now, I don't want vigilantes out there, of course not, but officers have to say stop in the name of the law. They can't just, draw and shoot. They have to give the perpetrator, the criminal, a chance to surrender.
Yeah, we're coming up on break here. We got about another 10 seconds. Thanks for the call. We're going to let you go, and we'll let Suzanne close us out here.
Well, I just want people to be aware that really the issue of national reciprocity, we're going to get to this after the break, sounds like a really good idea. I think when we come back, we'll talk about what the pitfalls are.
Perfect. That sounds perfect. Thanks for joining us, Suzanne.
My pleasure.
And thanks all you listeners out there in Radio Land. Listen to Scott, Shane, and Suzanne here on Prepper Talk Radio. And we'll catch you guys after this break. All right, welcome back to the show. You're listening to Radio for the Ready-Minded here at Prepper Talk Radio. And we're talking more gun rights, which I hate to say that. I hate to say gun rights because nobody gives us rights but our own creator, right? Let's go that way.
Okay.
It's not given to us by anyone. Rights are I don't know if inalienable is the word I want to use.
I would in
But,
this regard, life, liberty, and property. This is going back to John Locke, who was an inspiration for Thomas Jefferson when he wrote the Declaration of Independence. Look, life, liberty, and property, and incumbent upon life is the obligation and the duty to protect your life by
your
any
property.
means necessary, absolutely, with deadly force,
Yeah.
if you need to. And again, because as we mentioned in the previous segment, the need for the militia not only for to be vanguards against tyranny, but also to defend from Indian raids back then, and also from personal assault. This wasn't just as a defense of tyranny. It was, again, for personal assaults. So we were the militia. This is very part and parcel with prepping. Some people might not think this is relevant to prepping, but yes, this was an aspect of preparedness, and this is why it is still relevant today.
Well,
It's
I think
amazing
somebody
we call it prepping now, right?
That was
it's a
just
buzzword
living.
Life.
for
It was
life,
life, yeah.
right? Life,
Yep.
life as it was is now prepping.
Well, that's the argument. Life has changed, right? So we don't need this anymore, right? So those who decide for us can decide that we don't really need these.
Well, you're
these
raising
rights.
you're raising a really good point. I have this book. I can't find the exact passage, but there was concern when they were discussing the ratification of the Second Amendment in particular, that if we had a militia and the militia was part and parcel or was coexisting with the standing army, that eventually the people that were militia would start focusing on their careers, their families, and be lax in their training, which we're going to discuss is very important, and farm out that responsibility because we had a standing army. Well, I submit to you, we've seen this today where people think that it's up to law enforcement to keep us safe, to protect us, to defend us from the assaults that the framers thought that we were supposed to protect ourselves from.
Well, and they've taken it so far that if they do decide at some point, oh, okay, yeah, I am going to get a gun for personal protection, they don't take it upon themselves to get the training that a militia would have were given them, right? So there's a lot of gun owners that go out there and they'll buy a gun and they'll put it in a safe and they'll never use it, or they'll put it in their purse and they'll never use it. They'll put it in the glove box, they'll never use it. They'll never learn how to clean it. They'll never learn how to maintain it. They'll never learn how to shoot it correctly, so that it's a properly used tool.
And they never learn how it feels in their hand when it's fully loaded.
And the
Yeah.
thing is, when you mention training, this is why the national reciprocity legislation or proposed legislation is such a bad idea. The requirements for each state before they will issue, the states that do require permits, there is a vast disparity. California, I used to teach part of this class, is a 2-day course with live fire instruction. Utah, it's about a half-a-day course with no firearms training, live firing instruction. So who's to say what state standards are going to be applicable? Do you think California wants people from Utah that have very little training, or what if you don't need a permit in Wyoming? Will they be able to carry, or does everybody now have to get a permit? And whose standards do you think will be adopted? Because remember,
The most strict.
exactly, well, that's what we're going to get. We're going to get laws that are more like California's or New York's, and not laws like Utah's or Wyoming's or Arizona's.
Like you say, then it puts it under the purview of the federal government to then legislate our gun laws instead of through the states.
And
which- where it
again,
should-
this was left to the states because, first of all, it was never delegated in Article 1, Section 8 to the general government. The Second Amendment was a reiteration that they were prohibited from legislating in this manner. Therefore, that which was not delegated to the general government nor prohibited to the states remained with the states. This is called the 10th Amendment. This is a decision that was left to the states, representative of local social issues.
So this has been I think, on the topic of legislators for really decades. And so why all of a sudden now is everybody getting on the same page to do this reciprocity?
Well, what happened is people have been brainwashed into thinking that the 14th Amendment, and we're taught this in school, we're taught the Bill of Rights, we're told about the 10th Amendment, and then we're told the 14th Amendment makes the Bill of Rights applicable to the states. And everybody thinks, well, this is just a great idea because clearly we want freedom of speech, we want freedom of religion and the press. Of course the states can't, run roughshod over our rights, but what they're forgetting is the states, according to John Taylor of Caroline, in an ultimate act of sovereignty, created this general government. these states also had constitutions that predated the Second Amendment and the General Constitution in 1787, the Virginia Declaration of Rights. All of these states had very carefully safeguarded and guaranteed the rights of their individual citizens to keep and bear arms.
This is a hot topic. The phones are ringing. Let's pick up a call here and see what they've got to say. Hello, you're live here on Prepper Talk Radio. You have a question or comment for us?
Yeah, it gets worse. Oregon, I had to get a concealed weapons permit up there. They showed me 2 videos, and my wife 2 videos. It cost us about $100. It was just a money generating thing. I got no useful information or training out of it, and I should have been exempted completely out of that because I was in 2 different pistol teams.
Oh, wow.
And one of them was an Army team, and one was the Utah 1980 team. But and I've looked at this every which way. I'd like to find out what she's getting at about where reciprocity is a bad thing. So I'd like to grill her a little bit. You there?
Oh, my goodness. My heart is beating. We'll get into that later. We're not going to talk about that now.
Okay.
Just
so my gun can stay holstered?
Your gun can stay holstered.
Okay.
Yes. But it does feel good at times like this.
Well, this is exactly...
Have this on.
Yes.
I have mine as well. And it is chambered. And let me calm down a little bit. Whew, breathe. Okay. Just a disagreement. I mean, we'll talk about it a little off air, but and Scott's dealing with it right now. So I'm going to hang up here on caller on line 4. Thanks for calling in.
Sorry about
that.
Missed
the last of your call here. Whew. All right, so we're back, and we're going to take a breath here, and we're going to keep talking about reciprocity. So where do we leave off here, Suzanne?
Okay, well, we left off was this is really an issue for the 10th Amendment. Any regulation of firearms is a state matter, and people will often cite driver's license. Hey, you know what? People are allowed to drive and take their driver's license and cross state lines. And when they challenge me on that regard, I say, okay, that's fine. Cite for me the federal statute mandating one state after another has to recognize each other's licenses. And that is a voluntary system, which is what we have right now with reciprocity. It is a voluntary system. The problem is it doesn't include every single state, and people want that, but if you have to understand, in the long run, this is a very bad idea.
But it is somewhat voluntary, right? Because if you don't get a concealed firearms permit and you're concealed carrying, you go to jail. So that's not voluntary.
But in the matter of a driver's license, it's different.
Yeah, well, when we cross state lines, it is a voluntary system among the states to say which out of state licenses they will honor. Now, with driver's licenses, it would be economic suicide to refuse to take others. Yeah. Other people cite the full faith and credit clause found in Article 4, Section 1 of the Constitution, and this is something that was taken directly without any change from the Articles of Confederation, and this simply ensured that citizens in one state could own land or property in another with the full rights or citizens of that state. What they're doing is confusing this with licensing agencies. So, for instance, I have a license to practice law in the state of California, but good luck, if I want to go into a court in Utah and approach the bench and represent somebody without a license to practice law in Utah. So the licensing agencies have remained the distinction or the responsibility with the states themselves. Otherwise, they would be superfluous, and the states would just be superfluous to the general government.
Same thing as with all other contract licenses. My dad's a general contractor, has been for, almost 40 years, moved to Utah, and his license obviously doesn't transfer because he came from Colorado. But the process here, the licensing rules and regulations have made it almost impossible for him to get a new contractor's license without him paying out a ton of money and then handing off money to other contractors. And so, okay, now let's look at licensing of a concealed weapons permit, which is that even really constitutional? It's our right. Why are you taking our right and adjusting it?
Making us pay
It's
a fee.
because lawmakers are afraid of people that have guns on them, criminals, and so they mandate a law to adjust things for everyone, not just the criminals. Because how do you regulate a law that only criminals have to abide by?
Well, this is very common when people say state firearms laws are unconstitutional. Believe me, having come from California, as you did as well, we hear, well, these laws are unconstitutional. The Second Amendment says, regulated militia, blah, blah, blah. We have the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. But here's what you have to understand. Remember, the Bill of Rights was only intended to apply to the general government.
To the federal government.
And exactly.
Not the state government.
Which is really a national government. And they were very clear with the preamble to the Bill of Rights to say that this was being added to instill the public confidence and the goodwill of the general government, that it would always have good intentions and not jump its constraints. And that's why it was there. Also to inform the people as well that they could trust and have confidence in this new government. And what happened was, after the creation of the 14th Amendment, it was misinterpreted deliberately in a case, I believe, in 1925 called Gitlow versus New York. Now, backing up a little bit to 1833, we had a case, Barron versus Baltimore, where John Marshall, Chief Justice, even said that, no, there is nothing in the 14th Amendment that can be construed to, in the Bill of Rights, to be construed to apply to the states. I cannot say that it does. So after the 14th Amendment, in 1925, a leftist judge said that it applied to the states. There is absolutely no constitutional, no historic record supporting this. So this is the means, I say, by which our federal republic and our system of federalism has been systematically dismantled. This is why we have Roe v. Wade. This is why we had school busing. This is why we have Obergefell. And this is how they will justify national reciprocity, as well as states running to the federal judiciary when they complain about their gun laws. People in states of California will go to the federal judiciary. If we have one cookie-cutter method, it will be one that applies to everybody. Right now we have 50 layers.
Yeah. Let's take a call here. Hello, you're live here on Prepper Talk Radio. You have a question or comment for us?
Yeah, I do. This is Eagle.
Oh, hey, Eagle.
Utah.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Good. How are you? Thanks for calling in.
I'm fine. Oh, are we on there now?
We are. We're live, yes.
Oh, yeah. Listen, I like your attitude about all this stuff, but you've got to make a real fine judgment between the Constitution as the founders originally thought it to be and what they ended up with it. They ended up with not life, liberty, and property, but life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which would include property or the pursuit of a free press. It's a very fine distinction, but please understand it is a very, very important distinction.
Well, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is a clause that was lifted, I believe, out of the Declaration of Independence and not the Constitution, notwithstanding that it's very common to have, for instance, in the New Deal, FDR one, it said we were entitled to recreation and a good job. So they do hearken forth with those sentiments that I think our government now does feel that it is their obligation to provide us with our happiness and our equality and everything else that is outside the purview of the legitimate role of government.
And that's a good point. I think the problem is also that it's been spewed enough times that people now think that that's how it should be, is that the government should be able to make the laws, change the laws, and affect the laws to take care of me, right? And so that's the big argument we hear all the time is, oh, the government will take care of us. No, they won't. That's why we prep, right? And so preppers want to be self-reliant, self-sufficient. And we're not the first people to do this. I mean, that's where the Founding Fathers came in, and we're trying to live as close a free life to their principles as we can. But the problem is there's so many people who have been brainwashed over the years through our public education systems. Yep. I'm sorry, they're very broken. Through the law, through the media, through so many broken systems that should tell us big red lights, Those systems that they keep enacting aren't working. They haven't worked in the past. They don't work now. Let's remove as many of those as we can and get back to a better society, a better organized group of individuals living in the pursuit of happiness, right? The pursuit of liberty.
What, sir?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
If I may just comment one more time, and then I'll listen. I'm telling you, you're making a mistake if you narrow this down to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is not that. It's the pursuit of folks. Go by the.
There's the 2 points. There's the Constitution, and then there's Declaration of Independence, right? Those are the 2 different points we're talking off of.
Okay, I understand you want to sell guns, but forget it.
Oh, I don't. I don't sell guns. I sell freedom. I don't even sell that. I give it away. I don't get paid to do this, so.
And our freedom is better guaranteed when we have our own guns, our own firearms. So I'm not sure exactly, Eagle, what you were trying to argue,
or what point you were trying to bring across. And I apologize if I wasn't understanding it. I think what I'm trying to say is that whether you're using guns or not doesn't matter to me. Whether you have them or not doesn't matter to me. But whether I should be allowed to have them, whether I should be allowed to use them to protect myself, that matters to me.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right? And everyone's rights to those, to the availability of those, whether it's guns that you're talking about or this could be farming equipment, right? There could be laws governing farming equipment. That's the ridiculousness of this. It's just a tool.
Yeah. And we're up against our break again. Caller who's calling on line 4, call back after the break or go ahead and keep hanging on and we'll pick you up right after the call. Thanks for listening here at Prepper Talk Radio. All right, you're back here with us on Prepper Talk Radio, radio for the ready-minded. Here, Scott, Shane, and Suzanne today talking about gun rights in particular. Gun laws. Unfortunately, gun laws are political. I don't see how they're anything but politics.
Well, what I wanted to do was just drive the point home. People think that because our guys are in charge right now, and
our guys,
President Trump,
quotes in the air.
If President Trump is going to be able to elect a Supreme Court justice, that this thing's going to be in the bag, and they can hammer out. A friendly court will be able to hammer out any issues that we have with this, because we know that California will go to court to stop this from being enacted. They're not going to want people with our licenses coming into the state of California. And you know what? This is something that California absolutely has a right to say no to. And their duly elected legislative representatives are voted in because the people of California don't want people have.
And people can move out of California all they want.
Which is exactly what I did. So the problem is going to be now this is going to be taken to the Supreme Court, who is now going to legislate from the bench and come up with a national standard. We may even get a May issue standard, and then everybody's going to suffer.
That'd be horrible.
And then have draconian laws throughout this entire quote, nation, pardon my use of the N-word. And then we're going to have one method that will ensnare everybody and then also make law-abiding citizens criminal by no other reason than, again, judicial fiat at this point, because it won't even be legislative. So it's a very dangerous proposition, and people also have to look at the big picture. There will come a time when gun-friendly representatives and court officials are going to be put in a position to now take away all permits in the interest of public safety.
Right.
Our federal government hereby revokes all concealed carry weapons. And you're also going to get a national registry. You're going to get a nationalization, and they're going to know who has all these records and who has all these permits, just like they've done with health care.
Any inch we give them, they'll take a mile. And
Okay,
that's,
I told
that's the principle.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I told we'd pick up our caller here on line 4. You're here on Prepper Talk Radio Live. Did you have a question or comment for us?
Yes. Well, two things. One, as far as disputing or discussing cars, driver licenses, and gun permits and stuff,
Yes.
the difference is cars are a privilege, 100% privilege. You're not by law allowed a right to a vehicle, as where firearms or right to bear arms is a right. But also, with that in mind, certain states require a registry
I have heard, and I was hoping you can clarify whether or not if you've heard this or not, that the governor of Hawaii actually, if you own a gun, you will not be allowed into Hawaii, or some form of restriction that if you are on a registry of owning a gun.
No, so
you can't
I actually have a brother-in-law that lives there, and when he moved there, he had me take over some of his guns. There's certain restricted guns that you can't bring into the state. Whether you're on a registry or not, it doesn't matter. There's certain restrictions, different types of guns. Kind of like California, you can't have 30-round magazines. You can't have an AR-15 pretty much in any way, shape, or form. The way they're pounding it out.
And by the way, look for that to be part of any national legislation. Look for several firearms being banned from carrying. Look for magazine restrictions, caliber, that sort of thing.
And the same thing, like in Hawaii, there's certain rounds you're not even allowed to have. So there's state by state can mandate those laws, which I disagree with, but that's the state's right.
Did you have another comment or question for us?
Great question.
We've got some other callers waiting.
Well, living out here in Georgia, I mean, we don't have the gun, as far as I am aware of. We have a website that's like locally funded by donations to help fight for our gun rights on the state level. So, I mean, this is just something that, and forgive me if I'm kind of going back on something. I've only been able to actually been paying attention since 4:30 here in Atlanta area.
Yeah.
We're glad you're here.
Because I was, just coming in after work. But anyway, but this is a big thing, and I've only become a Second Amendment advocate or activist, and I really use that term loosely because of just my own life changes over the last 8 years, kids and what have you. And I'm realizing now, and here I'm 42 years old, and I'm just now getting into prepping and getting it, and I feel like half my life is lost. So I really appreciate the information you guys have put out, because it's really got me on the fast track of trying to do prepping and what have you.
It is our pleasure.
But anyways, thank you.
Thank you so much for the call, and great to hear you from all the way across the country, and that you're. And I kind of feel the same way. I kind of woke up more fully around that age. I mean, and I feel like, a lot of my life was lost. So, thank you for that comment. I've got another call here. Let's go ahead and take that as well. Oh, they're gone.
They're gone.
I'm a little too slow.
So let's switch gears. Can we switch gears? I'd like to try to get in the last 8 minutes. Let's talk a little bit more stand your ground, castle doctrine. Let's talk about that for a second. What it really means, what we can really do, what we can't really do. I mean,
in many instances, it is essential to know exactly what these rights are when you're defending yourself, defending your family, defending your property. So let's get a little bit into stand your ground, castle doctrine as it applies to your home and to your vehicle. Take it away.
The generic rule is that you have a right to use lethal force if you have a fear of imminent and immediate serious bodily harm or death to yourself or to others, and this is subjected to a reasonable person test. Would a reasonable person under same or similar circumstances feel that they were under this imminent threat? California has a statute, Penal Code Section 198.5, where if you find somebody in your home, you are given a rebuttable presumption of having that fear. Utah now has the ability, if you use lethal force, the prosecution or anybody questioning the incident has the option of saying, well, you had a possibility of retreating. So that's going to somehow play into how they maybe interpret the case. And the problem is you can be subjected to, have this looked at by a very anti-gun member of the district attorney's office, police, media, and so forth. So what this proposed bit of legislation is, I forgot what the number was to take away any consideration of whether you had the ability to retreat. Because realistically, what does retreating entail? Taking your eye off the threat and putting yourself in a vulnerable position. So I very much support this. If you feel that you are under this kind of a threat, if my gun comes out, if I get to the point where I have to take it out of the holster, you don't think whether or not you have to retreat. Your obligation to yourself and to your family is to survive and do what the Colonel Jeff Cooper said, the only honorable response to violence is an overwhelming show of counter violence. That doesn't mean you shoot till your slide lock goes, but you shoot and you do what you need to do to stop the threat.
Yeah, you neutralize the threat and you move on. That's the key. I love the way that you explain it because, had Shane or I tried to explain the doctrine better, it would not have come off so eloquently, first of all, nor would have been so pointed. So thank you for that, because the question comes down to, okay, what's the reasonable person test again? It's not what's some judge in some far-off lands test. No, it's what's a reasonable person's test. And I think that's where we really need to maintain that right and focus on keeping that right, because if someone comes into my house, there's going to be a problem. If they're not invited and they just show up, I've got a wife and kid that are my number one priority. And I'm going to go between me and that person, and I'm going to go through the door with their body and whatever's left of them to get them out of my house. And every father and husband should do that. Everyone that has a desire for peace in their home should be able to do that, because the only way to keep peace sometimes requires that use of force.
I think the case that really opened my eyes was this tragic incident that happened in Connecticut with a family. The father was home, by the way, and shame on him for not being able to protect his family. He was tied up, and the mother and these two precious girls were brutalized before he finally murdered them. I believe the father did survive. But here's the other thing. This woman and one of the girls were actually taken to an ATM to get cash out for this guy. So how many missed opportunities were they giving up to be, their own rescuers by getting some attention? There was an article I did actually a show on called Never Surrender. Surrender is not an option. And Larry Mudgett, who has a self-defense school out here in Provo, wrote that article, and we discussed never, ever giving up in a situation like this. And this woman and these kids perished, and that made me realize, I'm home with my kids. If somebody kicks down my door, I was in California, we had a lot of gang activity. It could be anybody. You don't want to feel like a victim. There were a couple times where we lived where I thought somebody was trying to break into our home, and I felt absolute terror. Once I became trained in firearms, I felt that we had another situation, and it's amazing the sense of calm that comes over you. Not excitement because you get to kill somebody, but you don't panic. You don't feel like you have no control over the situation, and it is a very, very I guess I should say liberating experience to not have to be terrified and knowing that your survival is in somebody else's hands.
So the next question that pops into my mind in our last few minutes here, open carry or concealed carry?
It depends on a lot of factors. And as trying to honor the laws of Utah, if I'm going to conceal carry, it's very difficult depending on what I'm trying to wear. Men can wear it on their hip and just the shirt goes right down. That space is taken by me. So it's hard to hide it. There are ways to do it. I am not an advocate of putting in my bag because somebody can take it from me or it can be mislaid. There are tactical reasons why you want to keep it concealed. It's a very personal choice. Some people are very judgmental when it comes to this, that you're stupid if you open carry, you're stupid if you don't have a round in the chamber, but you have to do what you're comfortable with ultimately. And you could do an entire show on just this subject.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have, actually. Yeah. Shane and I,
that's true,
in year one, we actually, if you go back in the archives, we had a conversation
with Van Hansen
about, do you have one in the chamber versus not? And we were both told by our guests at the time that, no, you have to. Are you stupid if you don't have one in there? And it doesn't matter. It's up to the person, what you feel comfortable with, and what you've trained reasonably well with to be able to respond. And I think
you should eventually get to that point where you are comfortable with one in the chamber.
And it depends on your firearm. I'm carrying a Glock 27. I don't have an external safety on there. And if I were to be in a situation where I knew I had to have a round in the chamber for my safety, I think the better choice is not to go in such an area.
Absolutely.
And to be personally and to be situationally aware of where you're going. I've been in situations where things got a little dicey. The closest I got in Salt Lake City was unholstering it, and then I waited to see what happened, and we ended up not having to put one in. But, be aware.
Well, I think not having one in the chamber is like driving your car without a seatbelt. Oh, I'm going to wreck. Let's plug in my seatbelt real quickly here.
So
you have to know that's not going to happen.
Right, but that's we have to remember.
And we're almost out of time here.
That's your right, and that's your opinion. Yep. And that's the way you want to do things. I carry one in the chamber when I carry. But at first I didn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it took me a while to get to that
either.
point.
Me either.
And there are times now that I won't. It just depends. But I mean, with a revolver, it's different. With a slide, I mean, it's different with every type of sidearm.
And be familiar with the laws in your state, because Utah
Yes.
does have some laws regarding having one in the chamber, whether or not you're
Whether it's
carrying
considered
without a
loaded or
permit.
unloaded or-
Exactly.
Right. And what age you are, and exactly. And where you're at as well, if you're in a school zone or where else I might be, and what age you are.
Just don't go into the post office
Do not even go to the post office parking
or
lot.
any federal building.
Also, if you
With
go
a
to
gun
the
in your
airport and you
vehicle.
travel, take your loaded magazine out of your bag.
Did you do that?
Yes.
Well, at least it wasn't the firearm, though.
I
so.
know. That would have been a bummer.
So far, I've only lost my multi-tool and credit card knife. I've never had to worry about anything else.
You lost your multi-tool, huh? I'm sorry to hear that. Well, thanks for listening to us. It was a quick last segment, as usual. Thank you, Suzanne, for joining us and teaching us about gun laws in Utah, and in particular. Great, very fun discussion. Thanks for listening to Prepper Talk Radio, and we hope you'll join us next week.